Welcome back to every episode of Death Battle reviewed in 10 words or less. So, after the eternity that was Season 2, the underwhelmingness of Season 3, and whatever the hell Season 4 was, you'd think most people would have a pretty valid reason to drop this show. To that I say, absolutely. I've dropped shows for doing much less. Now that I think about it, I'm not really sure why I didn't. Could it be that my tastes have changed? Perhaps nostalgia, maybe just the love of mayhem and violence. Or it could have been waiting for them to finally do that Link vs. Cloud rematch for Hylia's sake. No matter the case, if I had dropped it, I wouldn't have gotten to see the absolute gloriousness that is Season 5. There's a reason this is considered by most to be the overall best season of the show, both in terms of scope as well as consistency. In fact, there's really only a couple episodes from this season I would consider bad, or at least not as enjoyable as the rest of the episodes. Season 1 has its charms, but the age shows. Season 2 is awesome, but the length is still a noticeable blemish. Season 3 felt like a case of one step forward and 3 steps back. Season 4 was a strange homunculus that couldn't decide if it was good or bad. Season 5, on the other hand, is the whole package. Don't believe me? Then why don't we look at each episode individually in 10 words or less. Ready? Go! Animals were harmed in the making of this video. Death Battle! A family show. A JoJo's character lost on the internet. Oh my god! Haha, yeah, suck it, Crash! Nick's Goofy impression is the best and worst thing ever. A Halloween special in May. Sure, why not? You've met with a strange fate, haven't you? Is it possible to fall in love with a video? An episode made possible by Luis getting drunk. There's a special place in hell for dog murderers. Damn, this battle was unreal!
Get it?
Wow, the animators really stepped up their game. Whiz and Boobstick, 100 years! Ben gets PTSD from animating the last Robot Army episode. Pfft. Roshi only won because he pissed on the moon once. No sarcasm or exaggeration, this episode is epic. I am so happy. This season is exactly what I had been looking for. The Death Battle team had it in them, they just needed to realize their full potential and also get bought by Rooster Teeth. Season 5 truly feels like the turning point of when this show found its footing by knowing exactly what it was and needed to be. Wiz and Boomstick have never been funnier and more charming, and finally getting to see them on screen adds a whole new layer. Analysis and explanations never feel like they drag or disrespect the characters, give or take. The fights have evolved to a point where I forget I'm watching a small-budget web series. I simply turn them on and get lost in the magic of it all. And what's more, the show got super experimental, trying out new forms of animation and even dabbling in live action. And unlike Season 3, these radical changes paid off, giving us so many amazing episodes that I could gush about all day. Again, with a couple exceptions, mostly for having some uncharacteristically wonky research and unremarkable animation. Though I will give credit for how cool Raven's soul self looks. It's a good thing the rest of the season got over this relatively rough start. Because of that, there'll be no worst list this time. Instead, we're gonna go straight into the honorable mentions and do my top 7 favorite episodes from the season. Why 7? It just feels right. Crash vs. Spyro is really impressive from an animation standpoint. Despite coming before Death Battle's major upgrade in 3D programs, Torian still pulled off a remarkable feat with these characters' designs. There's a lot going on with their faces, especially Crash, and I'm still impressed by how expressive they are. Now imagine this episode in Season 2 or 3. Actually, don't do that. We could have gotten something akin to Jellicle Sonic, and that's no good. Also, I find it funny that Spyro pretty much has the same motivation here as he does in Spyro vs. Toothless. Minus, saying Sparks' name over and over again while standing over his corpse.
Sparks, was this Sparks? Sparks, are you alright?
Alright, I get it!
Sora vs. Pit is one of those episodes that's great, but not as great when compared to the rest of the season, at least for my tastes. What I mostly love about this one is the voice acting, and how fitting Justin Briner and Bryce Papenbrook are for their characters.
So, whose rear am I kicking this time?
Sorry to keep you waiting!
These two have what I refer to as the twink typecasting, a role that also tends to be played by actors such as Anthony Del Rio, Jeremy Shatta, and most notably, Tom Holland. Now, I'm not saying they're all the same person, but they could have all been voicing Pit or Sora at the same time, and I don't think anybody would have known the difference.
You can teleport? Mind blown! You know what? You're a twink.
Nightwing vs. Daredevil is this show's first live-action fight, and for their first foray, I think it worked. It certainly helps that they picked a really good matchup for it to test the waters. One thing that's always bothered me about similar channels like Superpower Beatdown and even Ismahawk to an extent is that they'll choose fights that end up being too big for their britches and either look super cheap or too short to enjoy. Cheap animation is easy to work around. Cheap live action, not as much. This one, however, is grounded, claustrophobic, well choreographed, and makes me excited to see what they do next. Another Marvel vs. DC fight. And not Jason versus Michael Myers or John Wick versus Agent 47. No! I'm sure it'll be good.
Yeah, that only works when I do it.
Ultron vs. Sigma. This was an agonizing entry to decide. It was either this or Roshi vs. Jiraiya. Both of these episodes served as a bridge between the 100th episode and the season finale, so you'd think they'd have just been treated like filler. Far from it. Not only did they serve as great showcases of the potential in animated Whiz and Boomstick, more on that later, but both of these fights felt like one-to-one representations of the characters. Patrick Rodriguez deserves a raise for that ludicrously on-point Roshi impression.
This store is really close by. I don't know why.
And hell, Sigma himself is possibly voiced by his official actor, much like with Naruto vs. Ichigo, maybe, possibly. I don't know. Roshi vs. Jiraiya is great because it uses two clever fighters from franchises that are more or less about overpowering your opponent with brute force. So it was really cool seeing the back and forth mental chess game between these two, only for it to inevitably be decided by who blows shit up bigger. This is Dragon Ball after all. Ultron vs. Sigma feels like Eggman vs. Wily with better focus and a much grander scale. There are so many bits and pieces at work because of the robot war, and it gives Ultron and Sigma plenty to interact with, making the fight dynamic and exciting. Even though it was cool getting Sigma's VEA, I feel Ultron's voice, Austin Lee Matthews, truly stole the show. It was like robotic butter.
Hello, everyone. I'll accept your unconditional surrender now.
At the risk of sounding cliché.
So how to choose the better one? Simple, the music. It may have started in Season 4, with some bits of original music in Season 2 and 3, as well as the Goku vs. Superman theme, but the original music by Brandon Yates and Werewolf Darewolf really stepped up in Season 5. Turtle and Toad may slap, but I've gotta give the edge to Infection Perfection. The songs where Brandon incorporates lyrics are some of my favorites, including songs from Season 2 such as Alive and EXO, two power-hungry robots fighting to one of the most metal tracks on Death Battle. How fitting.
You're gonna be psycho.
Hey,
Gundam.
Big Zam!
Optimus Prime vs. Gundam. Listen, I was born in 1999, meaning I am the prime example of a 2000s child. So why does this 80s themed episode make me feel like a kid again? I have no connection to either franchise, nor am I particularly fond of the giant robot genre, but even I can't resist the urge to yell, "You got the touch!" while watching Optimus drag Amuro on the ground like a rag doll. This fight is beautiful, more so than any other 3D fight up to that point, and most of that beauty comes from the change to the Unreal Engine starting with this fight. So congrats to those who actually did get my pun from before. This fight showcases how much new versatility the team is allowed now. While the space section looks bright and colorful, almost like a kid playing with their toys, the land section feels gritty and almost like it comes straight out of a AAA video game. I'm also impressed by the seamless transition between 2D and 3D whenever we go inside the cockpit of Gundam. I've heard some people say Optimus had a jarring voice, but I don't know. I'm not that big of a Transformers guy, and it sounded cool enough to me.
Vile Decepticon, I have been in battle for countless eons.
Richard Barcenas and David Matranga fit their roles nicely, IMO. But once again, it really is the song that elevates this episode. I'm going to have to verify with my parents that they're absolutely sure I wasn't born a couple decades earlier. It must be the only logical reason why I get so emotional listening to Wings of Iron. Or maybe it's just that good and doesn't have to rely on nostalgia like 90% of blockbuster media today. That'd be crazy.
I must stand, so you shall fall.
Thanos vs. Darkseid. This is the kind of episode I have in mind when it comes to the word finale. A battle of epic proportions between rival characters people argue over constantly that goes beyond space and time, and yet it's easily one of the biggest curb stomps this show has ever done. As much as we hate to admit it, Darkseid was too much for Space Grimace. When someone fights with their hands behind their back most of the time, you know they're probably in total control. That part of your mind likes to go, but Thanos is so powerful, he's one of the coolest villains ever, and he still is. Raiden is also a powerful dude in his own right, but you all know how that song and dance went.
Oh, fuck.
That being said, this episode is how curb stomps should be done correctly, giving just enough information during the analysis to not spoil the victor outright, but at the same time alluding to it for those who listen carefully enough to make an educated guess. Even so, Thanos manages to put up one hell of a fight, giving us some of the most impressive and jaw-dropping visuals this show has ever done. Further proof that the fully fledged 3D team and change of animation programs was exactly what we needed. It's a little dubious how much time they spend throwing cars at each other despite being cosmic beings, but seeing Thanos get slap-chopped in the jaw by a cab makes it all worth it. Besides, we do end up in space eventually. I honestly don't think we've had an episode of this scope since Goku vs. Superman. Even Hulk vs. Doomsday is less destructive. I guess there's also Chuck Norris vs. Segata Sanshiro, but those two are still fighting, so it doesn't really count. Justice Washington and Edward Bosco fit these space dictators seamlessly, the latter of whom you may recognize as the much less intimidating Spyro the Dragon.
Woohoo! Stay right!
You know not the infinite wealth of destruction I command.
Think that's impressive? Then how about Radiohead from Hazbin Hotel?
Why, I haven't been that entertained since the stock market crash of 1929! So many orphans.
While the music has gotten flack for feeling out of place, I really liked it in the same way I adored the music of DBS Broly. Who doesn't love a good hype man? And for those of you sick of Deadpool, at least it had a narrative purpose in the show and tied into the fight. Believe me when I say this, he could have been much more annoying. And he only appeared at the beginning and ending. It just goes to show how diabolical Darkseid is. Forcing someone to relive a death like that over and over again is probably one of the worst possible hells I could think of. Plus we get some snazzy rubber hose 3D animation, which I'd love to see more of. Now if only we could get a director's cut of the apparent hours worth of recording Takahata did for this episode.
Did somebody say...
Nope! Not this time, buddy.
A foolish samurai warrior wielding a shape-shifting master of darkness.
Samurai Jack versus Afro Samurai. So far on our list of risks, we've had a spiritual successor to one of Ben's most stressful episodes, a change to a brand new animation engine, live action, and turning Wiz and Boomstick into cartoon characters, complete with new designs and visual gags. What's next? A completely hand-drawn episode that originated from a drunk bet? Considering how specific that last one is, that's how you know I'm not just bullshitting you guys. Samurai Jack is one of my favorite cartoons ever, and Afro Samurai exists, so this was the first time in a long time that I was super excited for an episode when it got announced. Sure, I enjoyed these episodes regardless of personal attachment, just look at this list so far, but it does feel nice to be able to argue myself who could actually win from personal account alone. Despite the simple style, this episode does a wonderful job of capturing the feel of Samurai Jack's animation. I really need to get a thesaurus for the word simple. Yeah, okay, sure. This meek choice in art design makes some of the expressions more effective, such as when Jack's hair gets undone, or how both fighters express pain, especially Afro. One of the many reasons I'm not into Afro Samurai is because of Afro himself. He hardly emotes ever, which is especially odd considering he's voiced by Samuel L. Motherflipping Jackson. I know it has a narrative reason or whatever, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. It makes him less relatable, and it's hard to get invested in his fights when he looks hardly invested. To be blunt, I find Jack to be a much more interesting character in comparison because he's calm and collected, but he still feels human and has plenty of personality. Afro Samurai the show may not do that, but here we get to see his eyes, he grunts, and he even has friendly banter with Jack.
Huh, you jump good.
Thank you?
This is an Afro I could get behind. Too bad this battle cost him an arm and his other arm. Oh, and his life too. Now Jack gets to wear the #1 headband. Whatever the hell that means. This fight is short, but it still manages to leave an impact thanks to the incredible animation, music, nods to the shows, and voice performances that prove Kaiji Tang is more than just a Chris of Bot stand-in. He's also a Phil Lamar sub too. And when you get a guy that leaves more of an impact on me than Samuel L. Jackson, you know you're doing something extraordinary. Maybe I should do an Afro Samurai review someday.
Watch out! Gotta get back to the past to play the shitty games that suck ass.
I'm not like other girls. I have snake arms.
Carnage versus Lucy. In our last entry, I was already familiar with both combatants to an extent. Here, however, we have a complete 180, so you better believe I was beyond confused when this one was announced. At this point in my life, I feel like I'm much more well-versed in pop culture compared to my early years of first getting into Death Battle. It's helped me appreciate many more episodes and what went into representing the respective franchises. But it's episodes like these that are rather humbling, because they serve to remind me that no matter how knowledgeable I think I am, there is always gonna be some other obscure anime or comic I've never heard of. And you know what? I'm willing to bet that most of you didn't know who Lucy was either. other. And that's what made this episode so dicey. Season 5 had largely been all about hitting the major bases when it came to highly requested fights. This is a double-edged sword, because while it's great to appease the fans, it doesn't always result in the most interesting outcomes. Like, sure, Crash vs. Spyro and Sora vs. Pit are popular fights, but I doubt anyone at least somewhat familiar with those franchises were surprised by the results. The risk of this episode doesn't just come from the combatants' notoriety, but also the subject matter. Pitting a blood-covered psychopath who kills dogs against a naked lady responsible for glory kills that'd make Doomslayer blush is a hard sell, but it worked. This is the first episode of the show to heavily combine sprites with hand-drawn elements, which goes a long way in making a fight more memorable when more than half of the show's repertoire is a purely pixel-palooza. It was put to great use here, especially when it came to Carnage and Lucy's tendrils, but this episode is also great at creating a chilling atmosphere thanks to the music, lighting, and haunting vocal effects on Carnage, provided by our friendly neighborhood announcer friend Chris Guerrero. All that, combined with Danielle McRae's underrated performance as Lucy, gives us one of the most goosebumps-filled episodes to date, and this scene alone proves that.
It's raining, you're bleeding, Carnage is starving.
Also, Carnage didn't move because he was being held down by the invisible tendrils. Just wanted to put that out there. So yeah, this strange and deranged episode is one of my all-time favorites, and considering this is one of the highest performing episodes of the season, it seems most people agree with me. Who says fortune doesn't favor the bold?
Can you lose to me in a rap battle? Sure you can!
Ryu vs. Jin. You'll notice that up to this point, I've been praising these episodes for taking strides to make Death Battle as big as it currently is by taking tons of risks in terms of presentation and technology. But here, we have an episode that is animated mostly by Torian, has no voice acting, and features two of the most popular fighting game characters of all time, one of whom is a returning combatant. This screams generic when you compare it to the craziness that is the rest of the season, and it probably wouldn't feel out of place in Season 1, or God forbid Season 3. I mean, come on, you're not even doing it in live action, what's wrong with you? But you want to know why this episode has consistently been in my top 5 of the show ever? 2 words: rhythmic adrenaline. The lack of voice acting would normally be seen as a downgrade by today's standards, but here it actually enhances the fight by keeping the action as focused as possible. Kyle Hebert and Brad Swale should be considered definitive examples of how to make a fighting game character sound as badass as possible. They're calm and controlled at first, but they're not immune to pain and know how to scream in agony, as well as scream in rage when things aren't going their way. Seriously, these are pretty much the perfect voices, and it even serves as great adaptation points. Talk is cheap after all. Why on earth would you want to try and ruin that with custom acting?
There's no way I can lose. Talk is cheap. The answer lies in the heart of battle. You could do better than that. Come on! I shall show you fear.
As for the fight itself, it feels exactly like what Torian was talking about when he said the best choreographed fight scenes should feel like a dance. The music, like the fight, starts out serene, but with each blow, the music ramps up, and by the time the two are fighting on a giant rock falling from the ceiling, the tempo and intensity of the music holds nothing back, backed up even more so by Omega Sparks' vocal performance. This single sequence is still one of the most spectacular set pieces this show has ever imagined, and once Ryu uses the power of nothingness, it's nothing but chills and goosebumps down my spine every time. I wonder how many Street Fighter fans started having a panic attack when the camera held on Ryu after supposedly killing his opponent a second time.
Woo! Yes! Yes! Street Fighter has a dub! The losing streak is over! Wait a minute.
I walk a path with no end.
You missed me!
I walk the path of the true warrior.
Ow.
So to summarize, I love this fight for its limited use of voices, harmonic choreography, a back and forth dynamic that keeps you on your toes, and some of the most breathtaking shots this show has seen. Do the results rely too much on scaling? Ugh, maybe, but who effing cares? Words simply can't do Ryu vs. Jin justice. This episode is a feeling that you have to experience yourself. I know we eventually got him back, but what a swan song this would have been for Torian Crawford. God bless us, everyone.
Player 1, Super Mario!
Mario vs. Sonic 2018. When you stop to think about it, 100 if anything is a pretty big fucking deal. To me, 100 has always felt like this imaginary number that people just use for hyperbole, like a zillion or 3. I've certainly never owned 100 of something, at least not physically speaking. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't gloss over this impressive milestone that Death Battle hit in 2018. They could have done something huge in scope, like Thanos vs. Darkseid, but that would have taken steam out of the finale. The idea of revamping one of their most iconic episodes to show off how much the show had grown is nothing short of genius. I could rejoice over seeing 2 of my favorite video game characters getting a second chance at in-depth analysis. I could gush over the beautiful hand-drawn style that is always a joy to see because of how sparingly it's used, making me wish Foot of a Ferret would return. I could discuss how faithful Cameron Nakad, who previously voiced Sephiroth, and Nicholas Andrew Louis sound to the official voices of Mario and Sonic respectively.
What?
Oh shoot.
Oh, mamma mia!
I could praise the music and sound design, both of which are a love letter to each franchise and don't seem to favor one over the other. I could get hyped over one of the best finishers this show has ever made. I could even discuss how funny and over the top their reason for fighting is. But you guys already know about that stuff. Instead, I'm going to explain why the introduction of Whiz and Boomstick as animated characters was the best change and risk this show took in the entirety of Season 5, and probably ever. I'm about to drop the hot take of the century on all of you. Death Battle would not be as successful as it is without its hosts. Let that sink in. Without Whiz and Boomstick, Death Battle would have fallen into obscurity, and Screw Attack would probably still be kicking. I know I've spent a majority of these videos talking about how cool the animations are, or how well this and that character was represented, but what would Death Battle be without its 2 hosts? Really think about it. Would we give a damn about any of this? How would hardcore versus debaters know that these fight scenes are accurate? How would fans of specific franchises know their characters aren't getting done dirty? How would casual audiences know what the hell is even going on? Without Whiz and Boomstick, Death Battle would have nothing to ground it in reality, nor would there be anything setting it apart from similar shows. It would just be another soulless show on the internet with zero personality cashing in on trends. Anyone can do Mario vs. Sonic, but there can be only one Whiz and Boomstick. This includes Ben and Chad. They've been recording together for so long that they're pretty much psychically linked, always finishing each other's sandwiches. Be honest, if something tragic happened to one of these 2, would you even want the show to go on? And that leads me to Mario vs. Sonic 2018, the first episode to fully animate them. Gone are the days where Gerardo would be forced to find some random footage that would somewhat correlate to their dialogue. Now the floodgates and avenues have been released full force, leading more potential for comedy, creativity, chemistry, lore building, presentation, and dare I say, overall quality. These 2 feel like, no, are legitimate characters, and because they're animated, it makes them even more likable and helps further this show's identity. Whether it's Ben spouting off insane calculations without fail, or Chad just dicking around and having fun, Whiz and Boomstick are the kinds of hosts I and many others aspire to be. I guarantee that as long as they live on, so will Death Battle. Thank you all so much for joining me. What are your favorites and least favorites of this season? Let me know in the comments and stay tuned for my thoughts on Season 6. Oh Jesus God, no! This is supposed to be a serious moment! No memes! God damn it, Deadpool!